Facebook offices in Jakarta, Indonesia. Tonight we're doing our first Facebook Live session of the ExtremeLives series. I have with me today Noor Huda Ismail.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Huda is the head of the Institute for International Peacebuilding. You're the founder of this organization.
Yes.
That's right, isn't it? Now, you have been working in the counter-narratives world for about 15 years.
Oh, that long?
This is what you told me before. So, since the Bali bombing.
Yes.
Now, you're focusing now very much on the Indonesian fighters who are returning from Iraq.
Yes.
You've been to Iraq recently.
Yes.
You've met with some of the fighters.
Yes.
Now, can you tell me what is drawing people from Indonesia to the Islamic State? While there might not be that many people from Indonesia who have actually traveled to the Islamic State and managed to get into the territory, there have been an increasing number of people who are attempting to go there, who have been caught in places like Turkey and returned to Indonesia.
Yes.
What is this lure of the Islamic State?
But, you know, before answering that question, one has to understand Indonesia is the largest Muslim population in the world, and like a 250 populations, and those who actually travel, manage to cross, is around 500, and then who's deported also almost is 1,000 more. It's in comparison wise, it's a very small number, but it's very alarming. So, and the allure for those individuals to actually travel has to do with what I call it pull and push factor, like the notion of the promised land, the caliphate, you know, what they believe, or this is what the Quran told them to do, you know, like to subscribe, but also has to do with the individual problems, you know, the sense of belonging, you know, the sense of meaning, quest for understanding, you know, like all those identity issues as well. It's very easy to brush them as a poverty issue, but it's in reality it's much more complex than that, you know.
So, what kind of recruitment methods are being used? Are we seeing in Indonesia a move to recruitment online, or is it still traditionally more face-to-face recruitment, or is it a mixture of both?
We have to look at onto history. The mobilization of Indonesians actually to participate in any international conflict is not new. It started in the 1980s, you know, where many Indonesians, around 350 actually traveled to fight in Afghanistan. And in 2000, also another mobilization of Indonesians traveling to southern Philippines to fight. In this two cluster of period, we see more people join to that fight because of the group. So it's called group connection, so like collective action. So individual mold by the group to be a fighters. But now with the ISIS, with the rise of, as you mentioned, social media, you see a shift from collective action into connective actions. They travel because they connect with an idea. But you know, but there is no single case of purely online radicalizations. The rule of offline radicalization is extremely important. So we are talking about the patriarchal system here. We are talking about the role of charismatic individuals, lack of critical thinking, imaginations. So it's not one way, or there is no silver bullet to solve this issue.
So let's talk a little bit about how both the recruitment areas work. So with the online recruitment, what kind of messages are being put out there attracting young Indonesians usually, although it's not always young people? What kind of images and what kind of content is being produced that they see online that they find attractive? So
for hardcore jihadis, for those who actually really want to put into practice their violent ideology, of course, you know, all the images of young men carry AK-47, the black flag, you know, the notion of manhood, looking cool, are very attractive. But those who also middle-class Indonesian, newborn Muslim, searching for identities, to my surprise, I interviewed those who return. They are attracted with the promotion of ISIS, the good life living under the ISIS. So even like one of you know, return fighter I talked to, when he traveled, he carried $1,000 and one goal, you know, one goal. So he wanted to be part of this caliphate project. Has nothing to do with the notion of fighting, you know. So by the time he arrived there, he was so disenchanted. So in my initiative, I have been using the voices of disenchanted fighters to actually counter the narrative of individuals who really want to travel, you know, that ISIS has been lying, you know, they have been, you know, like promising, you know, good life, but in reality, it was very harsh for those individuals.
And we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about when you were interviewing the people and what the stories they told you.
Yes.
But in terms of the still talking about the lure of how to get there, are the traditional face-to-face networks still working? And have the people who have those contacts, are they more successful? Have they been more successful in getting inside Islamic State territory rather than people who are being picked up at the border who may perhaps be almost like going of their own volition?
Yeah, I mean, like, online now is again, the online changed the landscape of the recruitment. It's speed up the process of radicalization. It's much more easier for individuals to get access to that information, but it won't work without offline, especially in Indonesia. Indonesian people are more touchy, they have a personal contact, all of these kind of things play very important roles, So online increase or speed up the process of radicalization, but it won't be enough. It requires offline.
And with the online propaganda that's being put out, that's very attractive, particularly, as you said, to people who are searching for some idea of some pure Islamic caliphate. Who is producing this content, and is it being produced in Bahasa? Is it being produced in local languages?
ISIS increased, completely increased the level of a wave any violence group do the recruitment. They come up with very Hollywood, good quality style of recruitment, good productions, and surprisingly being widely translated, including Indonesian. And some of the hardcore ISIS supporters in Indonesia, they also produce their own materials, to attract the allures. But now, the social media play an important role, but now the most important things that we have to look at also the encrypted social medias or other platform like a Face, or not only Face, like especially like a Telegram, and then WhatsApp, Zello, and others. Once people get attracted to the cause, getting further and further radicalized, then someone within the network started to connect them, and then this is the danger start.
And what kind of information is put out on those encrypted messaging apps?
Even like a technical aspect, how to make a bomb, how to carry out an attack, the target, the religious justification, and the most important also, the testimonials. Because before, when people can say, oh, this is not jihad, or you shouldn't go there. But when they're using this encrypted the password, they can say, look, the Muslims suffer, they are being oppressed, and you have to defend. So it's a create kind of a sense of guilty, So it's attack your very personal nation of being a good Muslim. If you are not, so as again, we have to look at ISIS issue as only tip of an iceberg. We might see other international conflict, and we might see groups who play into this notion of insecurity, the true notion of being Muslim, especially being Muslim man as a man, to protect the weak, this kind of thing. So this is very important, to look at this any international conflict as what you call it, as a place to put, as a theater, to put into practice their radical ideologies, and also as a powerhouse where turbocharging of this individual, like you want to have race, if you have a race, if you want to win, you have to go to kind of a mechanical place. So that's the role of the, the conflict, turbocharging you, charge you into a completely different fighter's committed one.
So what is a little different for people who are sort of more used to hearing about the European models of recruitment is that so many women and family groups have been attracted to travel to ISIS territory. Why do you think it has an appeal, and have they been specifically targeting women?
The social media provide kind of a notion of empowerment for women. Because in the traditional sense of organizations, you see a very hierarchical, where a woman always in the periphery. But in the social media, you can actually communicate, and this is very important. The group smartly using women to shame the men. If woman can fight, what happened to you? Where is your sense of manhood? Why should we see women? To take the jihad job. This kind of things, and then also it has to do with also what you call it, the fantasy. You know, the fantasy that women, when they get there, they may marry the fighters and then increase your status. You know, and this kind of things that we have to look at as well. You know.
And what is the reality for these people that you've interviewed who have come out from the Islamic State? You've been there very recently in the last month, haven't you? Talking to family groups, and most probably some of the men had been fighting. I know that you're still going through the process of interviewing them. What have you found? How was it? How was life for them?
You know, to my soul, because, you know, like one thing that I learned most during my fieldwork, interviewing those written fighters, there is no single trajectory. And they have a very different type of motive. For those who I interviewed, especially for the women, you know, they want to be part of, initially, because they are swayed by the ISIS narrative, they want to be part of this ideal world, you know, when they can have a, you know, a normal life and even like ideal life, egalitarian life. But in reality, on the ground, of course, it's not like that. Life in conflict is very harsh and very difficult. Those women had to hide because many fighters want to marry them. They are very young, and then this is like a struggle. And then they live there for 2 years, and somehow they manage a local smuggler and help them to go back, and then they surrender themselves to the Syrian rebel groups, and then, you know, they managed to come out from this massive prison, but now they are facing another prison, which is the judgment from the society, you know. So it's very challenging, you know. Like for me personally, I strongly believe the need for have a second chance, because I used to be one of them too when I was very young. I shared room with Bali Bombers when I was 12. But, you know, to my surprise, you know, when I worked for, you know, journalists covering the first Bali bombing, it was my turning point in my life. And then, you know, some of those who get involved, my own roommate, you know. So since that day, I have very personal questions, why normal individual can get involved in that. And then if I could, you know, go back to normal life and start new life, the same with this individual.
So you're able to connect with these people when they come out and they see somebody who has compassion for trying to understand what they might be going through. So does that mean that quite often they will open up and they will tell you more information than they would to perhaps other people who might be thinking, okay, we have to take these people and we have to quickly, you know, put them in front of a court, put them into prison, something like that?
You mentioned a very important word here, which is understanding. Because for me, understanding doesn't mean supporting. For me, it's very critical for us as a civil society, as a society basically, to understand the trajectory. Because no one born as a terrorist. It requires processes of getting involved, and reach a point where, you know, disgust or disappointed, and then some don't, you know, like they need to go back and then revisit. You cannot judge them, you know, like, because for me, I strongly believe that our identity is very fluid. You know, it might change. Depend on our specific circumstances. So I'm a strong believer that we using the voice of disenchanted, those who witness the harsh and brutal reality living under ISIS, will be very, very powerful tool.
So let's go back then. How will you be able to use the stories that they have told you about living under ISIS? So what kind of things were they telling you? Perhaps the men who were fighting, you know.
Yes.
What was their life like as a fighter, and how did they fit into this group of predominantly Arab fighters,
yes.
but as well as you know, European foreign fighters?
Yeah, I mean, like most of the individuals think that they might live under Islamic Caliphate, which is great things that they want to. They think that they want to be part of the one body. But apparently, by the time they arrive, you see right away the hierarchy. You know, the Indonesian foreign fighter that I talked to, they feel that they become inferior. The Arab control the whole game, you know. So therefore, for them to achieve a specific, you know, position, they have to be a suicide bomber. So basically, they are the cannon fodder of this kind of a conflict, which is very sad, you know. So, you know, like they want to be part of, you know, this project of Islamic Caliphate, the utopian notion of it. But when they arrive, right away you see the hierarchy, you know. The Arabs think themselves that they are better than those less Muslims, you know. So, and then of course the Indonesian fighters are skinny, you know, like compared to the Arab, and then they don't speak Arabic, they don't speak English, Not only that, there's a racial also, the racial, hierarchy, which is against basically the notion of Islam.
So the Arab fighters feel that it's really their fight because they're in the sort of in the Arab world.
Yes.
And so they have treated the Indonesian and perhaps the Malaysians as well, who are often put together into the brigades as people who were expendable. They could just basically use them to do the jobs where they were unlikely to return from.
Like they're the cannon fodder for this, and therefore revealing this kind of lies before general public, can be a very powerful lesson learned. There are many, because again, I strongly believe, Mosul has collapsed, and then soon Raqqa will be recaptured, and then this fighter will disperse everywhere. For the real battle now, you won't see in the exact locations, but their home countries, the battle of mind, the battle of ideology, the battle of convincing the heart of mind of impressionable young people who might join into this group. In the case of Southeast Asia, they might move into different locations, like in southern Philippines, like maybe southern Thailand. We don't know, and you will see the rise or the emergence of political violent entrepreneurs who smartly using this kind of story, tweaking into their own their agenda, and then and therefore, it is no way for the state only to solve this problem. So civil society, in the very short level, the family, the ownership of the problem. Because I have been receiving a number of requests from a father, for instance, who called me, "Hey, Huda, my son wants to travel to Syria." And then I visited them, I bring along my return fighter, and then they talk. And finally, this guy, decided not to go. Of course, it's not only me, but the fact that these people meeting with return fighter provide a completely different cognitive opening,
What about the women who were coming out? What did they say? Because they were drawn there with middle-class dreams, weren't they, of education for their children, perhaps further education for themselves, healthcare, jobs. What did they find living under the Islamic State? Of course, it's completely different. They told me, at least in one of the interviews, and hopefully they're coming up in my films, It's about, they are those Arab fighters, sadly, they're obsessed with marrying, this is kind of the daily conversation, among the fighters. Either you die as a Shahid or you get, married with a more, a woman, which is sad to see this kind of things, And you traveled back with them, or you traveled back at the same time as them to Indonesia, this group?
No, when I traveled there, I came back first because I need to meet with the family as well. Because as a filmmaker, you need to create a drama. You cannot just, you cannot just interview them in a static notion. You have to create a story. You have to move them. So people like this, it's a genuine initiative. It is, for me, it is genuine because one of my requirements doing the film is consent. It's very important for them to understand that they are being filmed. I follow them, we might use them, so it's not forced,
So you have seen them since they traveled back to Indonesia, or you haven't had any more contact with these people? I mean, what is happening to them now?
Happening now because, I follow the government procedure, because when they are outside the country, it's a part of humanitarian work. We give them a second chance, especially as the Muslims. We believe, for those who give any individual a chance to live, you celebrate humility. But now when they came here, they have to face all the legal requirements. The Indonesian government will debrief them and understand their trajectory, and then hopefully my government will help them to integrate back to society. But now I'm sure, because I'm sure a lot of resentment against those people, and I think it is sadly the mood is not good. Indonesian people apparently a bit hesitate to accept these people, and this is what I'm really sad. I understand, these people are not fully de-radicalized. They are being exposed for 2 years in this conflict. But if we pull it right, if we use it right, their story, we can use, I strongly believe that they could be agent of change within the society. Maybe I'm too optimistic.
What about those people who may have been part of or committed really horrific things while they've been fighting abroad? What do you do with those people? I mean, should they not face any kind of punishment? Should they be reintegrated without
So again, the noise, like we have to accept, and you will see in any society you will see bad apples. In any society, we have to accept that there are bad people, there are individuals. That sadly, the Indonesian government and society must scrutinize them and monitor them constantly. But the problem here with my government, we do not have the strong regulation yet to deal with these individuals. So yeah, I don't think that we cannot lump them together as a good individual come back and disenchanted. Some of them are really might commit horrible crime. Because if you look at all the experience in Afghan war, those who return here, they produced the first Bali bombing. So the Afghanistan is a very bitter lesson for us, that they create kind of a group understanding and a specific society where they like a create echo chambering society. Then we have the global network, the same with these people too, because as a guy in my metaphor in the beginning, if you want to make a race in your car, they already travel in a conflict zone and then they have recharged.
And so you've been involved with people over many years who have gone through a de-radicalization and reintegration into society.
Yes.
You've had some successes and some...
Too many failures.
And some failures?
yes.
So
it is not easy,
from your experience, what have you found that works? And obviously everyone is an individual,
yes.
So there's no rules across the board. But what sort of things have you tried as an individual, as part of your organization? What have you tried? What's worked and what hasn't worked so well? Mostly
I failed miserably if I fail also to provide them a second alternative. Second alternative, like as a new environment when they learn, when they pick up new understanding, new friends, social network. Basically, I fail if I also fail to provide a new social network. Those who success, for instance, through, because here in Indonesia, I'm not in the part of my promotion here. In Indonesia, I'm running a cafe. So in the cafe, people in the hospitality industry, those who work in the hospitality, you cannot choose your customer, right? You have to respect, to celebrate, to basically celebrate the differences. Those are successful ones. Because most of the people who I try to help, for instance, inside the prison, when they come back, they go back to their own community. When they go back to their community, they create echo chambering, So sadly, at least 10% cases of recidivism in Indonesia, in the whole cases of reintegration process. So since 2009, after the second Marriott bombing, this is very important, all the terrorist attacks either planned or committed inside the prison or by released prisoners. So, it's like a vicious circle. The Indonesian government has been doing excellent when the milk has been spilled. And they know how to clean very quickly. But to prevent the milk itself to be spilled from the families is very challenging.
So do you think that the keeping people out of prisons can be some of an answer to that? Or do you think that the prison network is being dealt with by Indonesian government now?
I think prison prisons, like a punishment in prison is not the only solutions. We need to integrate with other also social interventions. Pre-detention and post-detention as well. Or the preparation for them, because some convicted terrorists, they receive a very short sentences, and sadly, while they are inside the prison, some of them are much more committed. When we are producing, more threat, basically, if we do not tackle this prison delicately.
So Indonesia must have some experience with dealing with returned foreign fighters from Afghanistan, for example.
But not good experience.
So that they know that was, as you said, these people ended up committing often additional crimes.
Yeah.
So you've been talking to them now. What do you think they want to learn from this lesson that they've had previously with Afghanistan and change now? Because I would imagine there are plenty of other Indonesians who are still either trapped inside Raqqa or trying to get across the border, who will also want to come home. So there's going to probably, in my imagination, be a lot more of them as well.
Yes, again, we don't want to let the genie out of the bottles. you know, we can't help them all. You know, we can't help them all. You know, like we cannot just like provide them. Oh, you can come back. You do whatever you like. No, you can't do that. You know, because some of these individuals are really committed, as you mentioned. Also, some of them committed the horrible actions there. So it's a very delicate issue here. You know, like those that Indonesian government tried to help them to, you know, like to go back, because I think at the moment the Indonesian government need to have a new ammunition to challenge the narrative of those radicals. So therefore we need, but I don't think that it is a good idea that the Indonesian government must help all of them, you know.
And what about the women and family groups? Because if we talk about the returnees, the ones who didn't quite make it to the Islamic State, a lot of whom were picked up in Turkey and sent back, they are in a different category really, aren't they? Because they haven't reached the fighting areas. What's happening with them, and are there processes that they go through, particularly perhaps the women and children who?
There are today at least we have 43 deported individuals. Either they are deported, some of them in Turkey, some of them even as close as Singapore or Malaysia. They're deported, and 70% they are women and children. And then sadly, the Indonesian government do not have enough systematic program yet to deal with issue. You here in Jakarta, our real issue is not radicalization. Our real issue is a traffic jam and flood. You know? So it's radicalization is completely elite issue. But you know, we might bring into danger if we don't take this as issue seriously.
And so, what kind of programs do they have for particularly the women? Some of whose husbands may have made it into the Islamic State. Maybe they're trying to follow them. Some of them whose husbands may be in prison or perhaps killed in battle.
You know, at the moment, you know, the Indonesian government is still only able to do very minimum things where they stay in a rehabilitation for only 2 weeks, and then we help them to integrate to society. But it's way too short. So therefore, our organization or other organizations should take this issue to take this issue seriously. You know, like in my part, for instance, now. We are trying to engage with the businessmen too, with the chain of the business people that try to help them to integrate to society, you know, through livelihood activity, which is far from ideal.
Okay, we're going to take some questions now. If anyone would like to, if listening in and they want to send a question, we are going to log in and take some questions. So, as we fire up. So, Huda, what do you think should be done with the people who have been involved with fighting? What do you think should be done with them? The ones who have been fighting at the front lines of Islamic State. Do you think they should be put on trial? I mean, Indonesia does have a history of putting people on trial and showing that people are being punished. What do you think should be done?
You know, like this is very difficult questions. You know, like and also dilemmatic questions. Because those who come back and do fought, you know, I don't think that they're going to notify the Indonesian government, and they might be hidden in some way that we don't know. So if we manage to identify them, we do not have enough regulation to arrest them, because they, you know, like we don't have the rule, you know, like to say that it is illegal for someone to fight against any forces or something. We don't have that one. No, the Indonesian government is still working on that. But I don't think it will, you know, like we'll be going to have a law anytime soon. So clearly, I really don't know, you know, like I really don't know what should we do. What is the best way to deal with this? But I think the most important one, we cannot just let them go back to society without any legal processes.
Okay, another question here. How are young men being reached? And how do we occupy or counteract within those spaces? I think they're talking about the process of people being radicalized, and how do you counter that? Do you counter message that online, and how do you work to pull apart the face-to-face networks on the ground as well?
You know, like this is like this question is like it's similar with my first film called Jihad Selfie, where I follow a 17-year-old boy from Indonesia who from Aceh. And apparently, I met him in the border. He was about to go. Two of his friends already joined an ISIS. And then apparently the best way, it sounds cliche and it sounds cheesy, the best way to stop those individuals from engaging deeply in online conversation will be to have such a solid, good parenting relationship, The reason why, this is my character, Akbar, decided not to go because he remembered the messages from his mom and the good relationship that he has with his father. But those three sadly, three characters that I've been following, they have a familial problem. Maybe it's too easy, but I think what I'm noticing now, young people spend more time online rather than offline. When I'm still young, but when I'm younger, like my mom knows all my friends, but now I don't know most of the friends of my sons. For instance, through Facebook, they're just accepting, and then apparently now we are seeing what we call it millennial generation, that they don't feel uncomfortable if they are not being liked in the Facebook, So they feel so we are seeing this kind of type, that we might think the more unreal, the more real for these people.
Okay, and so the next one is civil society responsive to these returned fighters, and how do you think civil society will react?
I can't answer in general civil society worldwide, but here in Indonesia, apparently, we are not that compassionate society yet to deal with these people. So we all, it's just following what's going on the Facebook and the social media. And then other platform, the comment has been very harsh for these people. Oh, you shouldn't come back. We shouldn't give a second chance. Why? Even some of them, we shoot them. Why the state should give them a second chance? This kind of a comment, I think, will put them in such a difficult position. For me, I'm very optimistic in this kind of story, in this kind of initiative, because we cannot lump them together in the same box as a foreign terrorist fighters. Some of them genuinely, or they are swayed by the what you call it, the promises of ISIS, or some, because at least I talked to those 18, 18, those who return. Some of them are women, some of them are children. It's very, still very young, and I don't think, okay, we can blame the parents for that, but we have to give the chance for the children, and the woman especially, they are the victim of their parents' ideology, for instance.
And here we have one that says, how do you deal with someone with empathy when they've committed such terrible crimes? Why do they deserve your empathy?
Wow, this is very tough. I don't know whether I would call it an empathy. I would call it, we have to, in any society like Indonesia, we have to follow the existing rules. Those who commit such crime, of course, they must be punished, because they committed terrible crimes. And then they need to go through to a very complex rehabilitation process. We cannot just let them go like that. So, no, I don't think that we need to, I don't think whether empathy will be the right word that we need to come up with. I would say that we need to give them a second chance. So, but we need to tweak their story as a way to prevent others not to join. So level of collaboration from this fighter alone is very important from a fighter.
So how do you take those messages about the reality of what Islamic State has been for these people, and let the people who may want to make that journey know about it? How do you get the messages out? I know that you're making your film, but making a film takes a long time.
It's very long time. Yeah.
So how do you make sure that these messages, which are really powerful messages, I think, in terms of counter narratives, to hear the stories from women and men and
I might try to approach Facebook again, to work on this. But basically like this, there are different film play important roles, but short messages and social media also different. I make a film to where people can sit and for at least 45 minutes or an hour to have a discussion. So they come up with very thorough understanding of the film. They sit down. But the logic of social media is completely different. Too long, no read. Too long, you don't. So what I'm going to do, and I think in the process, I'm going to produce very short messages, maximum 1 minute or 2 minutes, powerful, boom, like this. and we can target it, and if like a feature like social media, like Facebook, we can actually select, like to counter specifically those very narratives, I think.
And is there any opportunity to use the people to tell their own stories, apart from in the filmmaking? I mean, do you sometimes encounter people who also want to get their message out as well? They say, I think I need to tell people what's going on.
Yeah, I think I think my role is very limited here as a filmmaker, as a social activist here. I think it's more people, more medias, more outlook, more a kind of this kind of spotlight will give those people a voice with a very comprehensive and engaging technique. It's very important. I'm not Superman who can solve this problem by myself, and there are many more great filmmakers out there that I think they will be willing to produce such a good quality of productions.
And there's a question here about economic empowerment.
Yes.
I mean, we were talking very briefly about whether or not recruitment happens in situations of more poverty or not. So in terms of how much is poverty an issue with recruitment, and if so, would economic empowerment at the local level in at-risk communities help?
I have been, I have been doing research like this, interviewing. This is in Indonesia case, for instance. But I talk not only with the convicted terrorists in Indonesia, but in Indonesia, out of 1,200 something convicted terrorists that I already identified one of them, almost 80% coming from from low economic, But poverty doesn't produce terrorism. But those who involve in political violence tend come from poor people, come from marginalized. Because you are marginalized, you are outcast from society, so you create kind of a subculture. And then they get together, and then they started to, to create a notion of us against them. Poverty plays a significant role, but not the root causes of terrorism. Even that what happened, then people in Africa will be, more terrorists. But, the thing you see in the 9/11, most of the hijackers come from wealthy Arab. They live a lavishly life, and before, and then therefore, but they're drawn into this because of feeling of guilty, feeling of shame, feeling of pit this kind of notion of West against Islam and things like this.
I was going to ask more about that. How much does that play in terms of a motivating factor, the sort of like international political scene when they might see that, Syrians are fleeing and it appears that nobody's trying to help them. Fellow Muslims being treated badly by Western countries. How much of a factor is that when you interview people? Is that a motivating factor?
I think, sadly, those who are especially involved in political violence activity in using global international system always come up. So as again, you can't solve this issue on the individual levels. You have to look at through with this micro level, individual issue, but you have to also tackle from the meso level, society, group level, but also the global levels, the international issue. You won't see the rise of a foreign fighter joining ISIS if you don't see maybe the invasion of US in 2003. So this is something that what we are seeing, the anger among Muslim community has to do also with the Western policy in the Muslim world too, But we cannot blame all problem to the West. I'm a Muslim myself. I need to have to own this problem. It is a problem also with the lack of critical thinking within the Muslim world. Our education system rely heavily on rote learning, all of these things, and then we rely heavily on the glory of the past. Islam used to the rules and things. They call it in Arabic al-Islamu ya'lu wa la yu'la alayh, and they said al-Islamu hilul half, like Islam will solve everything. I don't believe that there is, I don't believe in clash of civilizations, and I don't believe in Western civilization or Islamic civilization. What I do believe is borrowing each other's civilizations, So maybe now, sadly, the US or very, many people in the West, they're very anti-Islam, Islam poses a threat, but they use social media. There is no digital things with Arabic numbers, you know. They shouldn't stop drinking coffee if they hate Muslims, you know. So this is what I call, I think if I borrow the phrase from Edward Said, it is not clash of civilization, but clash of ignorance, you know.
And so the stories that people tell you, I mean, what are the motivating factors from the international community? I mean, what stories do people bring up? What images that they've seen, stories that they've heard, that they feel like they need to unite as Muslims to fight?
You know, like there is a very powerful message in Islam that Islam is like a single one body, like ummah, the notion of one body. Or if you are sick, so I have to take responsibility. And then all the images of the brutality of Muslims, you know, like Western or non-Muslim against Islam, again, you know, like Muslims. They might not. So this is very powerful. Therefore, when I talk about radicalization, I always look at this as a political issues rather than purely religions. Because, you know, most of the people that I have been talking to, they have a social issue problem first, and then they take religions as their justifications, or they take refuge within the religions. So then the religions play significant role. So I'm very, very pleased with this kind of initiative taken by Facebook and UNDP, as looking at this issue not only through the lens of security alone. We have to look at this as a social issue first, that eventually have security implications, you know.
So there's a question here where you were earlier talking about the Bali bombings and that you have a personal connection to that story.
Creepy one.
Can you tell me what it is and what your reaction was when you were a young journalist working on that story?
You know, I arrived on the scene early in the morning. I was called up by my boss. I was working for the Washington Post. You should come to Bali. There was a bombing. I arrived in the morning, and then I saw blood. I was crying. He said, who has the capacity of doing all of this such horrible things? So, you know, like I covered the story, and then a couple of months later, and then police sit down and then announce who might be the bombers. And then, wow, to my surprise, they're all my own roommate when I studied in Islamic boarding school. And since that, they are very personal questions, you know, like why normal individual can get involved with this. So now I read the Quran myself. I study in the same, you know, boarding school, but we end up completely in a different direction. It's like Tai Chi master, you know, like someone a big guy, and then, you know, someone tell a completely different direction. And throughout this 15 years of work, I learned two things. First, no one is born as a terrorist, and then people change because of two things also, what I call frame of reference, the book that they read, the newspaper that they encounter, and also field of experience, individual or friend that they met, event in their life that shape this individual into you know, completely different trajectory. I was lucky enough, you know, after finishing in that boarding school, after I'm inducted in the group, and I work for, you know, like I work as a tourist guide, meeting with many foreigners, working for the Washington Post. So I'm quite lucky with this community trajectory. Unlike my own roommate, you know, after finishing my boarding school, he got scholarships to study in Pakistan, and then in Pakistan, apparently he was posted in a camp called you know, like run by Abu Sa, you know, like Rabi Rasul Saif there, and then after that, during the holiday, get involved in Afghanistan, and it's like a gradual process like that, you know.
Did you ever see him again or not?
Yeah, of course I still see him, you know, I visited him, and even I wrote a book, you know, about this one. It's called My Friend the Terrorist. The book was selected in the Frankfurt International Book Festivals as a way of my introspections, you know. So therefore, I take this issue extremely passionately. Therefore, I strongly believe in the notion of second chance, because I could be one of them. Because I studied 6 years in Islamic boarding school, you know. I could be one of them. So because of I was lucky enough, you know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noor Huda Ismail. Thank you for joining us. That's the end of our first Facebook Live, Extreme Lives. We'll be back in about 2 weeks with our next interview.
Thank you.
Thank you.